Hello, my name is John Watson. By way of a brief introduction, I moved to Montana from the UK in August 2001, just 1 month before 9/11 happened. Shortly after arriving in Victor, Montana in October 2001, I joined a local meditation group run by Jack West, who at the time was married to Devra West. In January 2002, I was recruited by Devra West as a business consultant, my brief being to set up several non-profit corporations and one for-profit corporation, which was called Millennium Mind. I realized later that the meditation group run by Jack West was one way the cult criminal gang recruited potential victims. Corinne Coffin, a wealthy Brazilian Coca-Cola heiress and long-term member of the cult gang, was going to provide the seed capital for the project. Millennium Mind and the associated non-profit corporations were, according to Patton West, intended to introduce to the world a more egalitarian form of banking. As this endeavor was a startup, there were no funds available to pay me a wage. Believing this was a legitimate business, I agreed to do the work on the promise of pay in shares after I had completed my work, which was to take about 6 months. As mentioned, the third person, partner, officer, shareholder in this endeavor was Corinne Coffin, a Brazilian Coca-Cola heiress who had agreed to put $1 million of seed capital into Millennium Mind after I had completed my part of the project, which I did in August 2002. Long story short, after completing the work, sometime in August 2002, I was called to a meeting with Devra West. At the meeting, I was informed by Devra West that she had spoken to God the night before and that God had said that corporations and shareholders were a thing of the past. Devra West used her imaginary chat with God to not pay me the salary and shares I was promised. I was shocked not just by the blatant fraud, but by the cool, calm and collected way she gave me the news. It was obvious that this was not the first time that Devra West had done this. As for Corinne Coffin, I never heard from her again after I was constructively dismissed and defrauded by Patton West. I therefore assumed that Coffin was read in and part of the overall deception. This was later confirmed in my mind after I had tried emailing Coffin about what was happening, who never once responded to me. After telling me face to face when we were setting this project up that she was glad I was involved, as she, Corinne Coffin, was worried that Devra West would use the seed capital for her own personal benefit rather than using it for the projects it was intended for. I was later told by a student and long-serving member of her cult that in the past there had been many previous Save the Planet fake projects created by Patton West, which also never meant to go anywhere. Any funds raised to finance these projects all ended up in Devra West's private bank account to fund her luxurious lifestyle. Basically, this was a criminal front corporation, basically money laundering the proceeds of crime. At the time all this occurred, my wife's mother was very ill, so I sat on the matter for a few months. After my wife's mother passed, I decided in March 2003 to issue legal proceedings against Devra West for fraud, a lawsuit I won in 2008. After learning I was going to take Patton West to court in early March 2003, Patton West insisted on a private meeting with me at my ranch. That meeting did take place in March 2003. By that time, my eyes had been opened and I understood that Patton West was at the very least a pathological liar. So I decided to record the meeting with a hidden digital tape recorder, something that is allowed in Montana. What follows is the entire 44-minute conversation between myself and Devra West. To explain and give context and to counter Devra West's lies, BS and propaganda, I will regularly pause the recording and comment so as to highlight Patton West's criminal acts. Most of these criminal acts were committed against her employees and students, and the occasional business consultant like myself. These unfortunates being farmed like cattle for their wealth and their life force. This video is about my journey over the past 23 years. A journey that quickly led to the conclusion that Patton West was and is a career criminal masquerading as a guru and a wannabe minor deity. A journey that revealed that Patton West is a murderer and a serial killer. A journey that has revealed over 3 decades of racketeering, thousands of acts of terrorism against individuals, thousands of acts of terrorism over 19 years directed at me in an attempt to silence me. In addition to several sudden and very convenient deaths amongst cult members, I have at least 2 attempts on my own life as confirmation. Yes, past murders brought about by an occult weapon leave no connection between the murder and the victim. However, the convenient deaths of victims going public or threatening to go public is more than just a coincidence. Add to that Jack West's comments to me in 2002 that those who opposed his wife, by telling the truth, had a habit of dying suddenly. Adds credibility to my claims. Add to that Reynolds' comments to the Montana newspaper reporter in 2007 that I would be dead within 12 months or in jail for reacting to what Patton West was going to do to me and my family members makes a very strong case. The fact that the campaign of occult meaning hidden, violent attacks against me are ongoing 19 years after they were announced by Reynolds also speaks volumes. To be clear, Patton West's occult weapon used to murder, make ill, and injure her victims amounts to terrorism. Terrorism being defined in most dictionaries as the use of violence or threats to coerce victims into doing something they would not normally do. Being coerced to hand over the contents of their bank accounts, for instance. Being coerced into not reporting serious crimes against themselves or others to the authorities. Cult members being coerced to tell lies and give false witness in court or at employment tribunal proceedings, thereby collapsing the civil lawsuits that victims brought against Patton West. In my own case, I won my fraud lawsuit against Patton West in 2008. In 2010, I attended an appeal hearing in Montana that Patton West filed. Patton West has a habit, a pattern, a strategy of not responding to civil lawsuits that are brought against her by victims. Why would she waste money when she can use her occult weapon to injure them, make them ill, or murder them? For those that don't give up, don't get intimidated, don't get murdered, once she has lost the case, she then appeals it. At the appeal hearing, I was served by Patton West and her crony cult member, Jeffrey Reynolds, who I've never met. The result being that while my win against Patton West was upheld, the judgment amount awarded to me by Judge Langton at the original court case was drastically reduced. As for the 2 defamation lawsuits I was served with, the truth is an absolute defence against defamation, but only if you can afford to hire lawyers to defend the case brought against you. As I had moved abroad in 2005 to protect myself and my family, and because I had funded a lawsuit for 4 years to get the original judgment, I was unable to defend the 2 defamation lawsuits brought by Patton West and Reynolds, partly because, in addition to the legal fees, there were the flights to and fro to the US to defend the case. As a consequence, Patton West and Reynolds were both awarded summary judgments in the amount of $5 million each. This is what criminals do. If they cannot intimidate or murder you, they buy the law they want. The recording you are about to hear was evidence presented by my lawyer at the appeal hearing. Evidence that, were it to have been included in the trial, would have shown Patton West to be a pathological liar and an enduring and serious danger to the public. Somehow Patton West may be using her occult powers of persuasion, or her lawyer managed to persuade the appeal court judge not to listen to the evidence. In my mind, this was a mistrial. However, all the publicity forced Patton West to leave Montana for Arizona, where she went on to repeat all the crimes she had previously gotten away with in New Mexico and Montana. This video and the accompanying 2 websites were produced for a multitude of reasons, principally to force a criminal investigation into Patton West's criminal activities, and preferably Patton West and her accomplices should be tried under RICO statutes. Patton West more than meets the test by having committed no less than 7 to 8 qualifying crimes within a 10-year period. This video was also produced as a warning to the public to stay away from the occult killer. This video was also produced as a resource for the scores or hundreds of past victims who were, at the time, too afraid to fight for justice for themselves. This video was also produced as a resource for the multitude of ex-students and employees who were the victim of theft, fraud, extortion, and embezzlement over 3+ decades. Victims who were mentally and physically abused, violently assaulted, or threatened with murder. This video was also produced as a resource for the FBI, police, and state governments in New Mexico, Montana, and Arizona, where Patton West committed her crimes. Crimes that were committed over a 3-decade period of time. Crimes that included racketeering, thousands of acts of terrorism against scores or hundreds of victims, and let us not forget multiple murders. Crimes that included tax evasion, the blatant flouting of state and federal employment laws, and recently it was discovered that Patton West defrauded the US government out of SBA, COVID disaster relief loans, by applying for $150,000 from the government for non-existent employees. Lastly, there's a huge amount of evidence to unpack. We're talking legal documents, statements from ex-employees and students. If you need to review any of these documents or download them, then please pause the video to review. Thank you. Before we get underway and begin to dissect the lies, bullshit, threats, hysteria, and propaganda spouted by Patton West during the 44-minute meeting we had in March 2003, I wanted to give you some context as to how I ended up taking legal action against Patton West. As Patton West admits during the conversation you're about to listen to, the work I was tasked to do by her was never meant to come to fruition. It was just a device, a way of keeping me on board and close and engaged with the cult, why she tried to brainwash me into becoming a member of her cult. During the 6 months I was acting as a consultant, there were many attempts to turn me into another cult member in the hope that she could harvest my wealth just as she had done with countless other students, employees, and consultants before me and since. This has been her mode of operation for 3 decades, as any detective worth his salt would find out within 10 minutes of reviewing all the history around this awful situation. As I shall prove beyond any doubt, Patton West was never a guru or a service to others entity trying to make the world a better place. Patton West was and is a criminally insane narcissist who acquired an occult hidden weapon between 1990 and 1991, which she has used to facilitate crime. Crimes like theft, fraud, extortion, embezzlement, violent assaults, and murder, all the while presenting herself as a minor deity and the saviour of the planet. I learned during the 6 months that I was directly involved with Patton West charity that the brainwashed and conditioned long-term members of her cult gave their wealth freely, believing that their money was going to do some good. Without fail, all of their funds would end up being used by Patton West to fund her delusions and her luxurious lifestyle. I think it important to establish Patton West's criminal pedigree and how far that goes back in time. The slide up on the screen at the moment is from Jeremy Samuelson. It's self-explanatory. Basically, he was defrauded out of $10,000. And Patton West was a marijuana grower, pot dealer, drug dealer, whatever you want to call it. The next slide appearing on the screen is from Satya, a fellow student at the Robert Jaffe School of Energy Mastery. She got defrauded out of $6,000. So this is a long history of criminality. After I was defrauded out of pay and shares, Patton West basically went to great lengths to persuade everybody that she never had a business arrangement with me in the first place. On the screen at the moment are 4 business cards that we had a Colorado design agency put together for us. As you can see, I'm there as a director alongside Patton West and Corinne Coffin. This is clear evidence that I was directly involved in that project. Appearing on the screen now is a note I had to sign with Patton West to guarantee to pay the aforementioned Colorado design agency. Now, if I wasn't involved, wasn't a principal, wasn't a shareholder or a director, why would I sign a note guaranteeing payment to the design agency? Another piece of evidence on the screen now is a letter I wrote to Bob Brown, who at the time was the Secretary of State for Montana. As you can see, I'm setting up these corporations for Patton West. That's what I was paid to do. And it shows myself, John Watson, as one of those officers. On the screen now is a letter to me from Barbara Costantino, who was Patton West's personal secretary for 5 years. The contents are self-explanatory, but the main issue here that I want to bring to everyone's attention is that Patton West dismisses people when she can't control them, then lies about the reasons they left. The document on the screen at the moment shows the amount of money that Corinne Coffin gave to Patton West after I was dismissed. Now, this is interesting because it's about $740,000 she passed over. And as a 22% shareholder or thereabouts in the original plan, I would have had about $200,000 worth of shares. It's interesting that more or less that amount of money has been deducted off the total because I'm no longer there in play. The fact that Corinne Coffin wouldn't contact me after this happened shows that she was obviously fully involved in the attempt to defraud me. The next document on the screen is a copy of a newspaper article issued by the Ravalli Republic newspaper, basically evidencing the fact that I had won my fraud lawsuit against Patton West. Patton West's response was to post lies on her website, asserting that I had not won the lawsuit, that there was a technical error, and that no such overtures or business relationships with me ever existed. Again, this woman is a pathological liar, and she believes that nobody is ever going to call her to account. Note that Patton West accuses me of leveraging an extortion scam. This is just beyond belief, really. I mean, she's been getting away with this for 3 or 4 decades. She commits crimes against people and then projects or portrays her crimes onto the victim. This is a habit you're going to see over and over and over again. The next document is a notice from the Secretary of State for Montana banning Patton West's charity, which was just a front for organised crime and money laundering, and removing it from the state charity register. Let us now move directly to the purpose of this video, which is to make the case that Devra Patton West is not and never was a guru or an enlightened being, but rather a career criminal, a deceitful, spiteful, vengeful, criminally insane narcissist with delusions of grandeur. In the following exchange, we get a glimpse of the real, authentic Patton West, behaving as she normally behaves when she thinks there is not an audience watching her. Note the arrogance, note the attempt to stop me expressing myself by constantly interrupting me or talking over me. When it becomes obvious I'm not going to submit to her tyrannical behavior, she changes tactics to making threats, and when that does not work, she moves on to hysteria just before leaving. Is this the behavior of an enlightened being? No, of course not. This is the behavior of a career criminal, an organized crime boss who believes that her authority is absolute. This is the behavior of someone who is used to having her own way, regardless of the morals or the law. Where does this authority come from? It is backed up by her ability to cause pain, suffering, injury, and murder with, so far, impunity. This is the behavior of a tyrant, a murdering criminal who believes she can coerce, intimidate, and if necessary, use murder as a tool to silence dissent. Which is exactly what Patton West's husband, Jack West, warned me about in 2002. He told me that those who opposed his then wife had a habit of dying suddenly. This was followed by senior cult member Jeffrey Reynolds in August 2007 actually announcing my murder to a newspaper reporter. What Reynolds said was that I would be dead within 12 months or in jail for reacting to what Patton West was going to do to me, my wife, and my children. Review the evidence and decide for yourself. Is Patton West a misunderstood world server or a career criminal masquerading as a guru while using religious freedom laws as a cover for all her lies and propaganda? What you need to understand is that Patton West only operates her criminal racketeering business model in Western states where they either don't understand white-collar crime or don't have the resources to prosecute it. She has her own compound, which is basically a medieval fiefdom where her word is law, whatever that is. The state laws, the federal laws, they're all ignored. Crime operates in this little compound, no repercussions, because the victims inside the compound are too afraid to go to law, to go public. Lies and bullshit that she tells her students and employees, such as she is holding open the gates of time. Oh yeah. The other one of my favorites, is that the Christ gave her 2 degrees in person. In actual fact, Patton West's education never got past basic school, high school level, nothing more. And during my lawsuit against Patton West, she was asked to produce the 2 degrees she says she has, awarded to her by the Christ, of course. Patton West's response was that they were destroyed in a flood while she was living in Nevada. Don't have many floods in Nevada, but there you are. As Patton West stated herself,
it doesn't matter what is actually true.
It doesn't actually matter what is true. The subtext, which isn't said, is if she can persuade the public and her cult that her lies are their truth. Anyway, let's get into the recording now. "2:30 on Monday, the 3rd of March, 2003. So, thanks for coming. I think this meeting's long overdue, but thanks for coming.
Well, as I said, I've been gone a lot. And the legal counsel that I had received was to stop the exchange of communication such as it was earlier in the fall because it wasn't going anywhere.
Oh, for sure.
So I was advised not to speak to you. And in fact, if the attorneys knew now that I was, I'd probably get a bit of a what for. But I sincerely feel that going in the direction of litigation is stupid.
I would make the comment here that when her victims issue civil lawsuits against Patton West, she never does respond because she knows the civil lawsuits are going to take months or years to bring about a result. And in that time, she uses her occult hidden weapon to terrorize her victims into walking away empty-handed. And in 95% of the cases, that's exactly what happens.
I think it's really undignified of us both. It reminds me of Arafat and Sharon. And I just dislike taking part in it. So I really
maybe I should remind you that on the 2 occasions that lawyers got involved, you brought them in first.
That's correct. That's correct, because we really were sort of adrift at sea with our paperwork. and no one trusted that we would get the paperwork just through an exchange. So whether that was correct or not doesn't really need to be debated.
I'm not debating it.
I'm just saying that at this juncture point, to go in the direction that you seem to be wanting to go into is one that I feel very, like a dog being drugged by a leash to a place that I think is going to waste a lot of time and a lot of energy, a lot of effort, and a lot of money, tremendous amount of money on both of our parts, tremendous, that could be going to better uses. So on that principle alone, I felt inspired to come by and see if there is a way to really come to some sort of conclusion of acceptance.
Yes, pay me for my work on Millennium Mind and the whole thing is finished and we go our own ways and life goes on. That's the end of it.
Share with me, if you will, how you got to this point of feeling that there was a monetary due.
Wow. You heard me just say, wow. I mean, I already knew Patton West was a pathological liar by this time, but that took me by surprise, like all the conversations we had, all the promises, which she'd given to other people, other consultants before me, and since, all lies. The document on the screen above is a letter from her husband announcing my salary to the INS when I was emigrating into Montana. That answers the question. We're dealing with a pathological liar, a career criminal who has a weapon that she is certain will quell any dissent before it becomes a big problem, which is why there's lots of civil lawsuits that go nowhere and no criminal investigations. That's about to change. Well, let's go back to the beginning. First of all, I volunteered to work with you on Millennium Mind, not SAI. At your request, I went to work at SAI on an agreed pay scale, and that is ancient history. We don't need to go there. Millennium Mind was always a for-profit organization. It was always going to have a shareholding until you decided otherwise. Just one more sentence. At some stage we got to talking.
That was not a direction that ever was clear to me. Just so that,
well, then
if you want to go on, I think I'm pretty aware of how you felt as a businessman. Things should be set up. I just wanted to insert the piece that as things have moved forward, so much has happened that it has become clear to me that that approach was never the direction that the masters were choosing for Millennium Mind to go in.
I don't want to get into the masters, Devra. That is your get out of jail card. The masters, the imaginary masters, the voices that speak in Patton West's head that nobody else hears, this is her get out of jail card. Another example of this is Patton West harvests the members of her cult regularly. Dr. Cole was a quite wealthy woman who joined her cult, I think, when she was operating in New Mexico. Patton West got into all sorts of problems with the law and in debt and needed to harvest money from the members of her cult. So she beat the crap out of Dr. Cole, who did not hand over her money fast enough. This caused so much discomfort and upset in the cult that she did one of her magic discussions with the masters. And not surprisingly, the masters said that Pat Cole had the beating due to her because she was a Nazi in the World War II death camps. This gives you an example of how insane this person is or how evil this person is, that they would actually say something like that about another person and expect others to believe it and accept it as justification for Patton West to severely beat Dr. Cole to the point where the police were called and she was charged with assault.
That is who Millennium Mind belongs to. It does not belong to me, and it does not belong to you. It never did. It never did. Mm-hmm. So unless the vision was the vision that they're efforting to bring through on the planet, not just through me, but through the new partners that I'm working with, who are spiritual teachers, none of whom are interested in for-profit endeavor.
I still can't decide whether Patton West is criminally insane or just a pathological liar at the top of her game. Of course it was always going to be a for-profit corporation, and as soon as she got rid of me, it continued as a for-profit corporation. Fortunately, we're in 2026, and we can look back at 2002 and listen to her words, then move forward slightly to 2007 and see what she was actually doing. The first two images are taken from our website. At the bottom of the second one, you can see Millennium Mind amongst all the other businesses she was running at the time. The next two images are basically her testifying in court. These are copies of the transcript. She basically admits to having 4 businesses. Now, in the second of the two images, she states that she's a billionaire, which of course is a lie. At the time, she was close to bankruptcy, and as the newspapers show, she had a lien against her personally for unpaid employment insurance. Again, the lies are just staggering. And as you saw earlier on in this video, Miss Coffin had deposited her $743,000 into the corporation. So again, lies, lies, lies.
I'm really not wanting to talk about what you're doing now.
So is there, because I feel that maybe I'm foolish for thinking that if there was actually clarity, other than just your position, which you've dug your heels into so deeply, that it's as though no one else can exist. What was true for me, what was my experience, what Millennium Mind is in essence, what it always was in essence, is like non-relative to your world of ideology.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying there are 2 sides to the story, and
why are we having to agree?
Of course there are. And I remember having a conversation with you in your lounge of the lodge where we're talking about pay, and you said that you had a greater need for it at the moment initially, and I said that's not an issue, it's not a problem, and you said you felt that I was going to be having a salary of between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. That was discussed. It wasn't my imagination. Yeah.
If I was standing on a court of law, I would say yes.
Yeah.
That was discussed.
Okay. The other thing that was discussed freely amongst the 3 of us was a shareholding, and that came into fruition in the form of a draft contract, which exists.
Yes, we know that was all discussed.
Bingo! We have Patton West admitting that there were discussions and agreements around pay, and that there was a shareholder agreement which the lawyer drew up. So then how is it that when I win my lawsuit in 2007, Patton West puts the following statement up on her website, basically for the benefit of the members of her cult who don't get news from outside, or if they do get news from outside, they can't talk about it amongst themselves, or they get into big, big trouble.
So we don't have to argue about this. We can get a third party to look at it from a distance to see whether these things were discussed, whether they exist or not.
They were discussed.
Yeah.
I agree. They were discussed.
And then for some reason, I don't know when, around the May time, you decided that that was no longer appropriate. You didn't hold a meeting to say it wasn't appropriate. You just came out one day and said that we're not going in that direction, and there was nothing to replace it. So what did you think I would do? Just in a vacuum, just continue working for nothing forever? The whole premise of Millennium Mind, from my perspective, was we were going to set this up as a for-profit. There would be a salary, there would be shareholding, and when it took off, we would all move forward with it.
Well, but John, what ended up happening is that when I went to the lake in July and you were gone away for a period of time, I had a lot more time to meditate, to sit and receive what for me is important, because Millennium Mind really has moved from my heart and my mind more than anyone else's, and very little actually.
I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that. I was always an employee.
So what was made clear to me was the direction that you were wanting to take it in was not the direction that the masters or my higher guidance or my heart or whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter to me really, was wanting things to go in. And it may not go in that direction ever.
What direction was that, Devra?
Into the for-profit container. And the for-profit...
But you and the masters came up with that idea, and I dutifully typed it out on one of my many charts that you had me do with the balloons.
On the screen now are 8 images. The first relates to Millennium Mind, which was to be the for-profit corporation that headed her empire. It's a rough workup of a brochure. I did some work with this with the design agency in Colorado at Patton West's instructions. The other 6 or 7 documents that follow are what was worked up by me over a 6-month period based on Patton West's input. What she seems to be saying is that the Millennium Mind concept was now null and void because the masters had decided they didn't want to go in that direction, and that's her justification for not paying me anything. What really happened was that over the 6 months I was taken on in the hope that she could make me a member of her cult by working on me day to day, the brainwashing, mind control techniques used by the CIA. And after they failed, the project was irrelevant because it was never meant to come into fruition. It was just a vehicle to try and get me a member of the cult and to try and get me to fund her illusions, delusions. That was what was really going on. At the end of the project, Patton West asked me to announce the project in writing to the entire cult. This, in hindsight, was probably her attempt, should I not become a member of her cult, to basically dismiss me and say it was all my idea, blah, 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 which is exactly what she's doing. However, what it does state clearly is that I was employed by her for a 6-month period, and my signature at the bottom of this letter, which was emailed to every member of her cult at the time, proves that.
So what I discovered over all of these months, and I'm not through to the other side of it yet, is that it is being carefully unfolded. And the basis of Millennium Mind is a concept. More than anything else, it is a concept. It has to do with my writing, the transmissions of the archives of sacred manifestation. That is really primarily what it is about. So I have not done corporate consulting, even though it has been available to me quite abundantly, I might add. I have turned it down.
More lies from the master liar. Above on the screen are two images which we've seen earlier on in this video, which shows that Patton West continued to run and develop Millennium Mind after I was constructively dismissed, after doing 6 months of work to establish Millennium Mind. As for giving up on consultancy, that's another lie. The next four images appearing on the screen clearly show Millennium Mind as an ongoing entity well after I left, and it shows that Patton West was doing consultancy work. The next 5 documents to appear on the screen are what Patton West calls her master plan. Note the title at the top, Progressive Professional Evolution, Igniting the Exponential Factor of Creative Genius. That's consulting. Millennium Mind Consulting, no less, offers the ultimate success factor for the influential professionals. And then we get into the master plan, and it's all spelt out in the next 5 pages. It must be obvious to everybody now, especially law enforcement, that this woman is a criminal. I've obviously been defrauded, all the evidence is there, but we'll plod on and continue with the 44-minute interview with Miss West, during which she gets very, very upset that I am not going to accept that she defrauded me and just walk away with nothing. The criminally insane narcissist continues to bully, cajole, threaten me into accepting her version of reality as the truth. Here's a taste of what's coming.
That is the truth. You are fucking over a spiritual teacher, for Christ's sake.